Long before modern globalization, before ships crossed oceans and planes crossed continents, a network of routes connected the world. Across deserts, mountains, and empires, goods, ideas, and cultures traveled thousands of miles. This was the Silk Road, the trade network that changed history. Millennia before the first imperial envoys set out from China, the heart of Eurasia was already alive with movement. Across the vast grasslands and deserts, Bronze Age pastoralists drove their herds along river valleys and mountain corridors, linking distant worlds from the Alta to the Iranian plateau. Archaeological finds in the Koksu Valley of eastern Kazakhstan, including rock art and hilltop burials, point to seasonal migrations that connected communities over hundreds of miles as early as 2200 BCE. These mobile groups were not isolated wanderers. They were the lifeblood of a continent-wide network, carrying not just livestock, but information, technology, and precious materials across the steppe. Evidence from stable isotope studies of animal teeth in the Junga Mountains shows that herds moved between high pastures and lowland valleys, echoing similar patterns in the Syrian steppe. Genomic research traces the flow of Y chromosome lineages from the Pontic and Caspian region into Central Asia, tying together the Andronovo and the Bactria and Margiana cultures with later Scythian groups. These findings reveal a living corridor, not a barrier, where people and goods traveled long before the Silk Road had a name. Trade in metals and gemstones left an unmistakable trail. Lapis lazuli mined in Badakhshan, Afghanistan, appears in elite tombs of the Qijia culture in Gansu around 2000 BCE and in Bactria's burial mounds. Lead isotope analysis of bronze artifacts from the Hexi corridor matches ore sources in the Pamir and Tian Shan, proving that tin and copper crossed vast distances to fuel the rise of early metallurgy in China. Meanwhile, oases like Khotan and fortified settlements along the Hexi corridor became fixed points in the shifting landscape, supporting both farming and trade. Stone houses, storage pits, and irrigation channels from the late 2nd millennium BCE show how these communities anchored the flow of wheat, barley, and luxury goods. From the Mediterranean, copper and silver reached the Levant and Anatolia by sea, while the Indus Valley sent carnelian beads by ship to the Iranian plateau. Early written records, including Shang oracle bones that reference Western metal and cuneiform tablets from Mari that list tin and cattle from the mountains, corroborate the archaeological record. Long before silk, these corridors carried the first waves of exchange, laying down the skeleton that later empires would flesh out into the Silk Road. In 138 BCE, the Han court took a decisive step that would transform the scattered trails of Central Asia into the backbone of a global network. The emperor dispatched Zhang Qian, a low-ranking official, on a perilous mission beyond the Great Wall. Captured by the Xiongnu and held for years, Zhang Qian eventually escaped and returned to Chang'an with reports of powerful kingdoms, fertile valleys, and bustling markets stretching far to the west. His journey revealed the vast potential of linking China to distant lands, and the Han rulers moved quickly to turn intelligence into infrastructure. Imperial policy shifted from defense to engagement. The Han state established commanderies along the Hexi corridor, garrisoning troops in fortified towns and building a chain of relay stations known as Yizhan every 30 li, about 10 miles, along the main routes. These posts supplied fresh horses, food, and shelter for travelers and official couriers, cutting the risk of raids and speeding up communication across hundreds of miles. Archaeological finds at sites like Dunhuang and Lulan, Han-era seals, lacquerware, and storage jars offer evidence of this new administrative presence at the edges of the empire. The Han invested in more than just security. Engineers dug irrigation canals to support oasis agriculture, while road crews leveled tracks through the Gobi and Taklamakan deserts, making it possible for large caravans to travel in relative safety. Commanders oversaw the collection of taxes and the regulation of trade, turning once perilous crossings into predictable corridors for commerce. With the backing of the imperial bureaucracy, silk, jade, and horses began to move in greater volume than ever before, and the state's relay system allowed news, orders, and goods to travel from Chang'an to the western frontiers in a matter of weeks rather than months. Zhang Qian's missions set the stage, but it was the Han's investment in infrastructure and governance that transformed a patchwork of ancient trails into the world's first state-sponsored overland trade network. The Silk Road, as it would later be known, now had a backbone, one built on imperial ambition, logistical ingenuity, and the promise of wealth beyond the horizon. Traces of a vast commercial web appear in the most unlikely places: a sliver of Roman glass buried in the sand of Xinjiang, a wisp of Chinese silk woven into the fringe of a Mediterranean shroud. These are not relics of isolated encounters, but silent witnesses to a trade loop that spanned continents. In the oasis settlements of Lulan and Naya, archaeologists have unearthed fragments of cobalt blue glassware, and chemical analysis links these shards to workshops in Roman Syria and Egypt. Thousands of miles from the Mediterranean, such finds reveal that goods crossed not just borders, but entire worlds, passing through the hands of Sogdian, Parthian, and Central Asian brokers who stitched together east and west without ever seeing either end of the journey. Merchants, often anonymous and multilingual, became the social glue of this network. Sogdian traders from Samarkand, Parthian caravan leaders, and local guides built a chain of trust, credit, and negotiation that carried silk westward, and glass, silver, and wine east. Their records have mostly vanished, but the material evidence remains. In Roman graves at Antinopolis in Egypt, scientists have identified silk fibers spun in China. Microscopic analysis reveals a filament structure and dye signature unique to Han-era sericulture. These threads, once luxury trimmings on a noble's tunic, tell a story of exchange that no written contract survives to describe. The scale of this early luxury loop becomes undeniable when viewed through museum collections and chemical signatures. Roman coins and glassware surface in the tombs of ancient turfen, Chinese lacquerware, and silk threads appear in the ruins of Palmyra. Each object is a waypoint on a journey that crossed deserts, mountains, and empires, propelled by the ambitions of traders who rarely left their own homelands. By the 1st century CE, the Silk Road had become more than a path. It was a living artery, pulsing with goods, ideas, and the dreams of those who risked everything for a share of its riches. In the heart of the Silk Road, power belonged to those who controlled the crossroads. For centuries, Persian empires, first the Parthians, then the Sasanians, acted as economic gatekeepers, turning the continental mid-zone into a vast toll network. These empires did not just patrol the highways, they monetized every step. Caravans carrying silk, spices, and silver stopped at regulated checkpoints, where officials tallied goods and collected taxes in coin or kind. Multilingual coins inscribed in Greek, Aramaic, Middle Persian, and even Chinese poured from imperial mints in Nisa, Ctesiphon, and Merv, each stamped with royal symbols and local scripts. This currency flowed alongside the goods, facilitating exchange and marking the reach of Persian authority. Toll receipts and coin hoards unearthed from the ruins of ancient caravanserais reveal how tightly trade was managed. At the border posts of Hekatompelos or Rai, merchants paid fixed duties on silk bolts, glassware, and precious stones. Sasanian records detail a system of standardized tariffs, with rates set according to cargo value and origin. These levies funded road repairs, garrison wages, and the construction of fortified inns, ensuring that the arteries of trade remained open, but always under watchful eyes. The economic leverage of these intermediary empires shaped the very character of the Silk Road. Parthian and Sasanian rulers used their position to dictate terms, sometimes restricting the flow of silk to maintain high prices in the West, or granting privileged access to favored trading houses. The evidence is stamped in the layers of coins found along the route: silver drachms bearing the busts of Parthian kings, gold dinars issued by Sasanian shahs, and even Chinese copper cash circulating far from their home mints. Each coin tells a story of negotiation, taxation, and calculated control. Through this intricate web of tolls and tariffs, Persian states transformed geography into profit, turning the mid-zone into both a bridge and a barrier. Economic power here depended not on producing silk or glass, but on controlling who could move them and at what price. Ideas and beliefs traveled the Silk Road with the same persistence as silk and spices. Buddhist monks, Christian missionaries, and Muslim traders each found the network a living artery for faith. In the 7th century, the Chinese monk Xuanzang set out from Chang'an, crossing deserts and mountain passes to reach the Buddhist universities of India. His journey, chronicled in the great Tang records on the western regions, mapped a spiritual landscape as carefully as any merchant's route. The Mogao caves near Dunhuang, where thousands of manuscripts were hidden in cliffside grottos, preserve a record of this exchange. Sutras in Sanskrit, Chinese, and Tibetan, painted walls alive with images of bodhisattvas and foreign donors. Buddhist texts and iconography flowed east, shaping temples from Kucha to Nara. Christianity, too, left its traces. By the 8th century, Nestorian Christians had established communities in the oasis cities of Turfan and Chang'an. Stone stelae inscribed in Syriac and Chinese, such as those found at Turfan, describe the arrival of Persian priests and the translation of scripture. The Nestorian stele of 781 CE, erected in the Tang capital, stands as a testament to a faith that moved across linguistic and imperial boundaries, adapting to new worlds while keeping its roots in the Middle East. Islam followed the merchant's path. After the Arab conquests of the 7th and 8th centuries, Muslim traders carried their faith deep into Central Asia. Archaeologists have uncovered Umayyad and Abbasid coins in the markets of Turfan and Samarkand, proof of both commercial and religious contact. Mosques and madrasas appeared beside Buddhist stupas and Zoroastrian fire temples, creating a mosaic of belief. Caliphal policies encouraged the settlement of Muslim traders, weaving Islamic law and custom into the fabric of Silk Road towns. The Silk Road became a corridor not just for goods, but for the circulation of worldviews. Religious texts, coins, and monuments tell the story of a network where spiritual exchange mirrored the movement of caravans, ideas as portable and enduring as any bale of silk. Across the Silk Road, the movement of goods was matched by the movement of ideas, practical and transformative inventions that would shape the world far beyond their places of origin. Among the most influential was paper. In the dry sands of the Tarim Basin, archaeologists have uncovered fragments of mulberry bark paper dating back to the 2nd century BCE. These scraps, once used for contracts and Buddhist texts, reveal how a lightweight, affordable writing surface began its journey west. By the 8th century, papermaking had reached Samarkand, where local craftsmen adapted Chinese techniques to new fibers and tools. The city's mills soon supplied paper not just to merchants and scribes, but to the courts of Baghdad and Cairo, fueling a revolution in record-keeping, literature, and science across the Islamic world and into Europe. Printing technology followed. The earliest known woodblock printed texts in Central Asia date from the medieval period, with Samarkand emerging as a key center by the 13th century. Printing blocks carved from pear wood or mulberry allowed for the rapid duplication of Buddhist sutras, Quranic verses, and medical treatises. The spread of printing along these trade routes made knowledge reproducible on a scale never before possible, laying the groundwork for later advances in education and administration. Gunpowder, too, traveled these same corridors. Chinese military manuals from the 9th and 10th centuries describe formulas mixing saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur. By the mid-13th century, manuscripts in Persian and Arabic record nearly identical recipes, as well as designs for rockets and fire lancers. The knowledge moved not only in texts, but through the hands of itinerant engineers and craftsmen who carried the secrets of black powder from the workshops of Song China to the armories of the Middle East. These innovations, paper, printing, and gunpowder, were not simply curiosities exchanged for gold or silver. They became the foundation for new ways of thinking, governing, and waging war across Eurasia. The Silk Road's greatest legacy was not just the wealth it moved, but the knowledge it set in motion, shaping the intellectual inheritance of societies from Xi'an to Venice. Under the Mongol Khans, the Silk Road reached a level of connectivity and efficiency unmatched in earlier centuries. Kublai Khan's empire stretched from the Pacific to the Black Sea, and with it came the Yam, an imperial relay network of nearly 10,000 stations, each spaced about a day's ride apart. Couriers could swap horses at every post, covering up to 120 kilometers in a single day, while granaries at major stations held stores of barley and dried meat to sustain both travelers and animals through the harshest seasons. The Mongols introduced the paitsa, a metal tablet that served as a passport and privilege card. Holders, whether imperial envoys or favored merchants, could demand fresh horses, food, and safe lodging at any station, bypassing local tolls and taxes. Marco Polo, traveling east in the late 13th century, described how a bearer of the paisa moved unhindered across borders, protected by law and by armed patrols stationed along the main routes. Under these guarantees, the volume of goods soared. Chinese porcelain flooded westward, with production records from Jingdezhen showing a surge in exports to Persian and Middle Eastern markets. For a brief era, the Silk Road became a true superhighway, where a merchant, a monk, or even a Venetian traveler could cross continents with a speed and security that earlier generations could only imagine. A caravan winding across the heart of Asia was more than a line of camels on the horizon. It was a mobile community built for survival and profit. At its core stood the caravan leader, a seasoned merchant or Sogdian broker who negotiated passage, hired guards, and kept the peace among dozens of traders. The standard caravan during the Silk Road's busiest centuries counted around 200 camels, each loaded with bales of silk, sacks of spices, or bundles of glassware. Camels were chosen for their stamina, but even they needed rest and replacement. At major oases, teams would swap out exhausted animals for fresh ones, trading Bactrian camels for yaks or mules when the route climbed into the high passes of the pumice. Travel was dictated by the seasons. Caravans set out in spring or autumn to avoid the deadly heat of the Taklamakan and the snows of the Tian Shan. At night, merchants camped in tight circles, unloading goods and tending fires, while guards kept watch for bandits. The group moved together, pooling resources and sharing risk, a necessity when a single sandstorm could wipe out weeks of progress. Every stop at a caravanserai meant a chance to rest, repair gear, and exchange news with traders heading in the opposite direction. This constant mixing of people, animals, and goods turned the caravan into a moving crossroads, where languages and customs blended, and where sometimes disease found the perfect conditions to spread. In the day-to-day grind, the Silk Road's grand exchange depended on the discipline and endurance of these merchant collectives. In the middle of the 14th century, the Silk Road's dense web of caravan routes carried more than silk and spices. They carried plague. Ancient DNA recovered from graves near Lake Issyk-Kul in Kyrgyzstan, the Volga River, and Marseille reveals a single strain of Yersinia pestis, genetically identical across thousands of miles. The pattern is unmistakable. The same bacterial fingerprint appears in Central Asia, Russia, and Western Europe within a decade, tracing the very arteries merchants and pilgrims had traveled for centuries. Chronicles from Bukhara, Constantinople, and Venice describe the plague's relentless advance, moving with the speed of commerce. As the Black Death swept west, entire trading towns emptied, and the volume of overland caravans collapsed. Yet even as the Silk Road faltered, a new path opened. After the fall of Constantinople in 1453, Ottoman policies slashed maritime tolls and customs duties. Venetian records show that shipping a bolt of silk by sea to Europe soon cost half as much as sending it by land, with journey times cut from months to weeks. By 1500, nearly 3/4 of Asian silk bound for Europe traveled by ship, not caravan. The same network that once connected continents had also left them vulnerable, and as the sea lanes eclipsed the old roads, global trade found a new route, leaving the Silk Road's overland empire in decline. Centuries after the last caravan faded, new trade corridors echo the Silk Road's promise and its risks. Today, over $1 trillion in goods still cross Eurasia each year, shaping economies and destinies. As borders shift and alliances form, the lessons of exchange and interconnection remain urgent. The road never truly vanished. It simply changed form. What we choose to carry forward will define the next era of global connection.